I'm a paramedic in the southern United States. I've been involved in emergency medical services and the volunteer fire service since I was a senior in high school. So at the point this story was told, 7 years of it, in that time, I had seen some really strange and frightening events, some of which I couldn't explain. I was also aware that I had a lot of exposure to violence, both towards my patients and towards myself. I've been punched, kicked, bitten, plowed through by mental patients trying to get out of an involuntary hold, cut, and even stabbed with a used needle by a jerk who didn't like I took his blood for the police after a DUI incident. But this incident was by far the most disturbing, not only for what happened to me and could have happened to my partner, but for the events that preceded it and the fact that seemingly nothing was done after. In November 2011, I was working for a very large, nationally renowned ambulance company for which I no longer work for. While I won't name the company, I will say that they will cease to exist in 30 days because of a merger with another very large ambulance company. We had the contract to provide 911 service for a predominantly rural county in western Tennessee, and it was a fun gig. One call a day usually, and usually really sick or injured patients. The kind of stuff you love being a paramedic for. Lots of drugs and domestic violence-related calls as well. That night it was particularly miserable, rainy and just dark. The local 911 office had received a call about an assault, and now the deputies were calling for us to come assist them. The call came out as a woman down, unresponsive, and we flipped on our lights and sirens and headed that way. Paramedics generally work with an EMT, and mine that night was a woman about my age, and 6 months pregnant. Alex, as we'll call her, was about 5'2", incredibly non-threatening, and not a very pushy person. I'm 5'7" and at that time maybe 180, and I'm not a type A personality at all. Introverted and kind of a goofball, not overtly a take-charge authoritarian guy. I often joke that if I'm serious about something, something has gone terribly wrong. As we arrived there, I immediately knew something was very off. This was an older neighborhood, dating back to before World War II. The house was an old shotgun-style house, where the rooms are directly behind one another, so the living room would empty into a kitchen, which would empty into a bedroom. If a door was shut, the rest of the house was an unknown. The lights were off, other than the light from the blue strobes of the cop cars. There was a deputy at the door who said she was in the living room, but the deputies were all at their cars about 50 yards away on the main road. No one was doing first aid. The deputy said that the husband had said he had come home and found his wife laying face down on the floor and called the police. He said he knew his brother did it. The deputy warned me the husband seemed drunk and then vanished back to his car. As we walk in, we see no one around, no husband, which should have immediately raised a red flag. We found the woman between the couch and the living room table in the corner. The door to wherever was closed. We went to work on the woman. She was beaten to a pulp, her nose deformed, her scalp was split open, and she was unconscious. She had areas of bruising all over her, some in various stages, another red flag. But there was work to do, and we set about stabilizing the woman and beginning the process of starting an IV and placing a neck collar to immobilize her. In our distracted state, we hadn't noticed the man step out of the bathroom. I had just placed the collar in an oxygen mask and was listening to her breath sounds when I heard the distinct click of a breakdown shotgun and footsteps. My partner was at the door with her back turned to get a stretcher off the porch, and I stood up straight to come face to chest with a nearly 6'2" man standing there, putting a pair of 12-gauge shells into the shotgun. He was African American, massively built, and drunk, with an angry scowl on his face.
"I'm going to get them,"
he would repeat, looking at me with this gaze that, if it could have killed, would have cut me in half. No emotion other than anger at all. You could smell the alcohol, and he was sweaty and jittery. It felt like a movie playing that I was watching. All that training of, if the scene is safe, get out, was rushing through my head. But at this point, I realized he would probably shoot me if I tried to run. As I stood up from his wife and kept my eyes locked on his, I said, "Alex, get out, now," and heard her scream as she must have turned around and saw him. "Alex, get out, now. I'll be fine," I repeated slowly, methodically, as I placed myself over his unconscious wife, between him and my pregnant partner. He stopped, stared me down, and pointed the barrel of the shotgun straight at my face as he did so. Again, no emotion, no concern, just anger and rage. Alex took off down the driveway, screaming for the deputies.
I'm gonna kill them who did this. Get out of my way or I'll kill you too.
Cold as ice and with a growing and incredibly creepy smile, he said this. I thought this was a joke at first, someone's sick idea of a prank. Well, please don't miss, was my response with a laugh. He wasn't laughing. He just stared ahead at me, gun at his hip, pointed at my face. I replied, if you shoot me, she's gonna die. I'm the only one who can take care of her, was my response. At this point, I was trying hard not to break down.
She dies. You die,
was his response, and he sat down on the recliner across from us. He still had that smile, that creepy, toothy smile with those white eyes bearing down on me. I had shivers going down my spine. I thought this was it. This was going to be how I died. All I could think about, as I worked to tokenly bandage these cuts on this woman's head, was how I was going to look up and suddenly feel and see nothing. My head would be hamburger meat. But then he lowered the gun and looked at his wife.
My brother makes me do this. He made me do all that, you see? She was cheating on me. I had to. I didn't want to hurt her. She made me.
That same creepy grin, that same wide-eyed look, the same sweaty, trembling behavior. I was running out of things to do to keep this guy convinced I was busy saving her life. All of a sudden, I finally heard screaming and was blinded by flashlights. The deputies had been called back to the scene after they had left by my partner. When she realized they had gone looking for the brother, she called over the radio and had them come back. They stood there, guns drawn, yelling at the man to drop the shotgun. He did, and they threw him onto the ground and cuffed him. He started crying, screaming how she was dead, how it was his brother's fault, not his, and to leave him alone. Standing there, shaking, no, trembling, and wondering what just happened, we regained our composure, got our injured patient in the ambulance, and took her to the local trauma center. When we got back, a deputy took a report from us, and we had to file an incident report with our employer. We never heard anything after that. Fast forward to 2013 and I'm not working in the county anymore. While I occasionally see Alex and treat the whole incident as a joke, I don't really talk much about it. I never saw anything on the news about us and honestly never pushed the issue. I'm working for another service at this time and picking up a kid from that county's hospital when I see Alex and mention the event and ask whatever happened. She pulls me aside and tells me the rest of the story, and at that time, I realized more just how close I came to dying that night. The woman had regained consciousness a day after the attack and told the hospital staff that her husband had been drinking heavily that day and not taking his medicine. He had began accusing her of sleeping with his brother that night and had started hitting her until she had gotten knocked against the living room table and blacked out. He had eventually pled to the domestic violence charge and was placed in an inpatient psychiatric facility, and for all I know, he's still there. The creepy thing, his brother had died in 2002 in a car accident in another state. According to the wife, he took medication because he had lucid and intense hallucinations of his brother doing things to people and telling him what to do. The deputies knew the house had a history of mental illness calls and never warned us or flagged the address in our dispatch system. It raised more questions than answers. Why wasn't he charged with the attack on us? Why did the deputies leave us there? And why wasn't anything done on follow-up to help us?